Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is David Lawrence Palmer, the Leo King, celebrity astrologer at highvibe.tv. I'm making this video because this world is very confusing, especially at this present time. Being an astrologer, it's the duty of an astrologer to understand the cycles of the planets, to understand the cycles of the celestial and the super celestial, and help bring an understanding to this earthly realm or the terrestrial. Now, whether you look at today's timing where even our First Amendment right, especially as an American citizen and born American, where we have a Bill of Rights and a First Amendment to have the freedom of speech, is being censored. This is not new for being an astrologer, whether it's friends or family that try and cast me as a demon because they feel that astrology is demonic, or friends or family who are so scientific that think that it's pseudoscience. This is something and times that astrologers have always had to find the courage to speak up and have the courage to show people that it's neither of those two stigmas that astrology gets placed under, but it is the understanding of the divine nature that can help us through these very uncertain times, especially that we are here on November 8th of 2022 with a total lunar eclipse conjunct the planet Uranus that's in a T-square to Saturn, while the Sun, Mercury, Venus are in Scorpio. And having the North Node in Taurus, Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is at its detriment position in Scorpio in opposition to Uranus in the North Node, so the dispositor is in the south. And so I think it's very important for us to not head south in these times into the fears, head south into a place where we're trying to over understand or over objectify certain things that are coming from a place of fear. But remember to stay solid and understand the values that we have. And moving forward right now seems like a very tough place for the world and all of us individually. And I hope that me giving you history and the patterns that we are seeing in the astrology by transits right now help you not feel so crazy. Please remember that when I do this video that I'm coming from a place of an astrologer and that these are patterns that the planets are literally back to the same transits and patterns that were in history, and that whatever your opinion might be is your own. But at the same time, I just ask for you to look up these positions yourself. Whether you're somebody who doesn't believe in astrology, you can actually download and get your own astronomy program that can see where the planets are and see that in the time periods of what I will speak about, they're in the exact same positions. Now, I know it's election day in America for November 8th, 2022 with a total lunar eclipse, and I will say, I find it very odd. We had a total lunar eclipse in 1854 in Taurus with the North Node in Uranus. In 1854 is what is called the beginnings of the tragic Prelude. Now, that was the events that caused the Civil War. In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was done, and Kansas was no longer going to be a territory, but going to be a state, and it wanted to be a free soiler state. It did not want to be a slave state. But a border state, Missouri, decided to get involved and came across the border, double voted, and more importantly, forced and changed the elections and created what we know today as election fraud. And I find it very interesting that we're in a world today where they say that's never happened before. There's no such thing as election fraud, yet the cause of the Civil War was election fraud. And it came from people from the South and the Democrat Party at that time that did not want another state to be free. It was also President Pierce at that time who, oddly enough, was one of our weirdest presidents to be an incumbent president into the 1856 election, and the DNC at the time didn't feel that he represented the country well enough because of the blood on his hands, per se, of what happened in Bleeding Kansas and watching his own party cheat in an election and fight and kill to where the governor of the newly formed state of Kansas went up in arms and just said, let's just go with the results. I don't want any more blood. And that reminds me of the Electoral Count Act. And this might sound hard for people to listen to, but it's just coming from the astrological facts and also using history, that Electoral Count Act has a measure where if a representative from the House or a representative from the Senate come together in a written format and object while they are counting each state in alphabetical order, then both chambers go back into their own respected houses and debate for 30 minutes apiece. We only got to Arizona on January 6th, and if you look at the 2020 election, we had the same positions of what we have been going through for the last 2 years, and even including into this 2022 midterm elections, that deal with weird situations with the Democratic Party, the ending of a Whig party and the beginning of a new party, the Republican Party, and people also having a party or a group of people that did not want others to have freedoms and have them taken away and ownership at the same time. I think it's very important to remember that Jupiter and Neptune, which haven't met together in this same area, which is the ruler of Pisces, it hasn't happened since 1856. Every 13 years, Jupiter and Neptune meet, but we haven't seen them in their home sign of Pisces since 1856. And that was the change out of an incumbent president who did not get to run for president again. And Buchanan was brought in. And Buchanan was brought in because he happened to be away. He was a Democrat that was away at the time in Europe doing diplomatic work in order to have people forget about the election fraud, the blood on the hands of so many of innocent people that died, and the double voting that happened from what they called as border ruffians from Missouri. It's weird that we have a president today that was elected on a 0 year with the Tippecanoe curse, which is a Jupiter-Saturn cycle that we see every 20 years. Happens to be always the weirdest elections. I've done plenty of videos on that, whether it's the 1820 election where nobody else ran. So that's where you see Monroe win all the electoral votes. Or even the 1860 election with the beginning of a new party, the Republican Party, and the second that the election finishes, a party decides to secede from the Union and form the Confederate States of America. Looking at the history, we are in the same tunnel as those 1850s that lead to the 1860s. And I know a lot of people out there are feeling very weird with the censorship or the propaganda or the rights that have been taken away. We can use the 2020 alignment on January 12th of Saturn, Pluto, Sun, and Mercury that we're all in the same spot from our view from Earth. That was a moment that we will never see again of so much significance. Last time we saw those two planets, Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn together, was in 1517 into 18 with Luther, who went to the church. But at the same time, it was also in 1284, which was when Dante came out with his work, The Divine Comedy, and led to the Dark Ages and so forth. The transits and cycles last a lot longer than the moment that they hit. But in 2020, with Jupiter and Saturn, which we could all see, and we haven't been able to see it for 800 years, to look like one star, even though it's two planets, brings the weirdness to this whole factor, that we are all feeling very odd about the presidency that we are under right now, or the election, or what's coming out of the media. And we've been through this as a country before, and astrologically at this exact same time. We also are under the same astrology that happened to bring us to a point that when we started to look at the individual freedoms that were at stake, these were extremely debated, and always the side that is for freedom wins. And I think that this is important for people who might feel, with all the unpredictability that's going on in the world, and even the unpredictability that's happening with the astrology, with the total lunar eclipse that's going to exactly conjunct Uranus and square Saturn, that we have been through a shattered reality, as I've called it, for the last couple of years, and that we are coming right now on this election and during this time period to a convergence point of everything that's been happening from 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and into this 2022. We are finishing the Saturn cycle that has been through Capricorn and into Aquarius, and Saturn is the ruler of both signs. This has been a heavy, heavy time for all of us in the world. Jupiter, Neptune in 1856 also was quite a weird time. That was the Crimea War. And we are seeing a lot of propaganda and weird situations where we cannot discern what is true, what is up or down with the Ukraine and Russian situation. We don't know what the real truth is. We don't know any of it. The last time that Mars was retrograde throughout the full sign of Gemini was 1943 into the beginning of 1944. Same time period, October of 43, and finally stopped retrograding in January of 44. And that was at the height in the middle of World War II. This is also where Uranus is now, where we were seeing crazy tyrants and fascists that were doing what nobody believed was possible, but started to ally with the USSR and go into Poland. And we started to see the beginnings of World War II with this position of where Uranus has finally made it. And we are entering into the World War II energies, but also in the American astrology chart, the July 4th, 1776 astrology, Pluto is back exactly where it was from our view from the Earth as the declaration was signed. So we are in the Pluto return of America, which was the energy of the Revolutionary War. And Pluto is on its way to ingress and come into the sign of Aquarius on March 23rd of 2023. So we can all feel the same energy. And we have to remember that in October and November of 1776, where Pluto, exactly where it's at today, was where the side for freedom felt that it wasn't going to be able to happen. Washington also ordered his men to read from Thomas Paine, who created the book Common Sense and the pamphlets, but also The American Crisis, and that this is just an extreme time where people are going to have to realize that they have to step up and not be afraid, and to show up into this world and not let it just be taken away. It's definitely a crisis in many different ways, whether it's food or whether it's, for most people, gas prices with Jupiter retrograde and Neptune here that are in Pisces, which rule oil and fuel. We're in a very deceptive and very overinflated energy, and inflation itself at the same time as well is very correlated with Uranus and Taurus, which also deals with countries that create hyperinflation and use it to go to war. I feel like it's very important at this moment to remember to pick a side, because no matter how many times I look at the astrology, these are the transits where there is a side of good and a side of evil. Unfortunately, it was in the past, and it has stayed the past, where we're seeing it happen again, where if we take American politics, it is the Republican Party that has never just been a Republican Party. It was a Whig Party. It was an anti-federalist party. It evolves and even changes its name, whereas the Democratic Party has chosen not to. It's the Democratic Party that under these transits do the craziest of things. And people can't let go of their quote-unquote Southern ways. It also was in 1964, a year after JFK passed, which were ironically in the same astrology as 63, when JFK left in November of 1963 and was assassinated, unfortunately, where the civil rights act passed, and that was because it was Republicans in the House and the Senate that allowed Johnson to sign that act. Democrats chose not to vote for that bill. Democrats have also chosen to always, whether it's in civil rights or whether it's in the past of the 1850s into 60s, secede from the Union or do election fraud, that these things are not crazy to actually think about. Or when you see the Republican Party changing its identification, that this is what happened in 1856 with Jupiter and Neptune, as it was the end of the Whig Party, and now the talks of a man named Abraham Lincoln and others, who then ran in 1858 for the Senate, which he did lose, but did come back and beat the same senator he lost to become our president in 1860. That I know there's a lot of people out there who might get triggered and other people who this is going to give relief to, but I'm asking for you to really look at history and see that we are in the exact same astrological alignments as the Revolutionary War, the fight for independence and our rights. The same that goes with the propaganda. Look at the propaganda that was out in 1854, 1855, 1856, with where we're at with North Node Uranus in Taurus, or even with Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces. The propaganda was worse than what we even see now, more vile. And I feel that we are at also such an extreme time that Neptune has reached very high up into the sign of Pisces, where we have seen some of the most wild acts happen in our government, especially from people in our legislature beating up others, that it's important for us to remember that what side are we on? Are we on the side that's going to be free? Are we on the side that just wants to maintain this republic? And remember that this is a republic. Whether you want to use Nostradamus and his prophecies of a new republic, or you want to look at all the great astrologers such as John Dee that were from the 1500s and that spoke of this new republic and spoke of how to make sure that we maintain it so we don't come into a place of monarchs, a place where we are told what we must do, especially when it comes to when we're all following the laws that our amazing founding fathers had set for us and made very minimal and made very simple for us to follow, and they are not being followed today. Corruption is extreme when Saturn and Pluto come together. It's the corruption of the 15, 17, and 18 that Martin Luther nailed his exposing of corruption to the church, which led to Henry VIII to leave and make his schism of the Catholic Church in Rome. It's also what we've seen in 2020, as we've seen who wants to keep us all locked away and locked down and who doesn't. And this is really an interesting moment here where the propaganda is that people on the right, or people that might not even be on the right technically, they're just on the side that wants to maintain the republic and wants to maintain the peace and the prosperity that we're all allowed to have, that when it's being taken away from us, we're trying to maintain it. We're not trying to throw it away. We're not trying to change the rules here. We're trying to get the rules back. And that's exactly what happened in 1854 through 1856 with Bleeding Kansas. And we're in those same transits right now, same eclipse, and even with the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Scorpio. And so I ask you at this moment in this time to remember to hold strong, and to remember that the propaganda out there, that there are people out there that are trying to be fascist or take away this country or even create a dictatorship, are the ones that are doing it themselves, the same ones that were in 1854 through 1856, and a president that was so bad and is ranked as one of the worst presidents that literally the DNC wouldn't allow them to run as the incumbent president and put somebody else in. I know there's a lot of predictions I can make on this that I've made in the past, but I will say be prepared for anything, especially from seeing the swap out of a president that we have to the propaganda continuing at higher feats. And I haven't even wanted to, well, in this video at least, I talk in other videos about stuff I've made predictions since 2017 from what this pandemic really was about, and of control, of an illusion, and so many of the true conspiracies that are being brought up to the surface now, which have really been proven to show that these aren't conspiracies, but it's been the conspiracy against the people, the conspiracy against all of us as a collective. And I think that it's very important for people to realize that the astrology has showed us literally who, what, and how did these events of the past, and that they are all here now and easy to see. I just ask for you to make your own choice about these things and discern from history yourself. And just don't take my word for it. Look at the transits of these last 4 years, and look at the transits of even this lunar eclipse, and tell me in 1854 and the state of where the country was in the world, if you're on the right side of the fence. This is a time where, from everything from World War II to looking at the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, you do have to pick a side. And unfortunately, it's the same as picking an unconscious state or a conscious state, an aware state or an unaware state. And it's very important at this time to not allow others to push you around or to be afraid to put out the truth, because the truth is in the writing of our history. The truth is in what has happened. The truth is that the planets will be exactly where they are when we say they are, because it's not that we're the ones in control. It's God. It's the divine that's in control. And so we can try and change our perspectives and be a tyrant to God and not look at it, or we can look at the beauty and the grace and these amazing celestial energies that God communicates to all of us with, to guide us and to help understand that even our founding fathers used this to understand and be guiding a nation in a beautiful direction of freedom. And so many others that have come from the Renaissance and even earlier, and even going back to the greatness of Rome or Greece, or even all of the most amazing people that have come through India and Vedic and the Vedas, that it's astrology that has helped guide us, and using our patterns in history to help us in the moment. I'm sending you so much positivity. In no way am I making this video to call anybody out specifically, but it's pretty easy to see who and what when you look at the history, and when you can see the overtones of spiritual energy on whether or not people are being honest, true, and you can feel it within yourself. And don't think that you're crazy. Know that God is speaking to you very deeply right now, and to not pay attention to the charade and the circus and the propaganda that's trying to fear monger you into a place that will take away even more of the freedoms they've taken away. I appreciate you all. You can always find me on highvibe.tv. Over the last couple years, with my predictions that have all come true, more and more people have found every way to silence me. And I'm just blown away. But at the same time, I'm not afraid, because I know that the truth is always on the side of those who stand up for truth. And I hope that you can stand up for it too. And I hope that you can find this video as a way to not be afraid to stand up for your own questions that you're allowed to have, and your own interpretations that you're allowed to bring. I appreciate you all very much, and thanks for watching.